Hi, it's Clara, staying by your side with songs and words. Today, I'd like to talk about how to deal with perfectionism. Actually, I recently went on a trip abroad. I don't have much experience traveling overseas, so I was quite nervous, but I made it back home safely. Through this trip, I learned something important about perfectionism. I've often struggled with perfectionist personality. As I've mentioned in previous videos, if I make even a single mistake, I tend to feel discouraged very quickly. But this trip was different. Since it was a solo trip, I planned everything on my own. That trip was a lot of fun, but it certainly wasn't perfect. For example, I completely missed the major event because of my own mistake. And I also got a migraine during a trip and couldn't eat the meals I had been looking forward to at all. Normally, I might have thought the trip was fun, but I messed up. Awful. But this time, I was able to think. I made some mistakes, but the trip was fun. It was great. The reason is quite simple. Because I set the bar extremely low. My goals for this trip were very clear. Not to develop economic class syndrome and not to get arrested. Economic class syndrome is a condition where blood clots can form after sitting for a long time on an airplane and may block blood vessels in the lungs. It can be life-threatening. Since I don't usually fly, my top priority was staying healthy and avoiding that risk. And the second goal was not getting arrested. Of course, I wasn't planning to do anything illegal, but I've heard stories of people accepting gifts or luggage from strangers abroad and getting arrested because illegal items were hidden inside. So I decided to focus on safety above all else. In short, my goals were health and safety. Even then, headaches aren't something I can fully control, so as long as nothing life-threatening happened, I considered it a success. Because of that, even though the trip wasn't a perfect 100 out of 100, it became a satisfying and positive memory. This experience was a big lesson for me. It felt like I finally found a hint on how to live with perfectionism more comfortably. As I mentioned earlier, I've often struggled with perfectionism. For example, if I make one mistake at work, I keep thinking I've lost everyone's trust and feel down for a long time. Even at a fun gathering, if I say one awkward thing, I immediately think, that's it, I shouldn't have come at all. Because of this, I've spent a lot of time thinking about how to deal with perfectionism, searching online, and recently even talking things through with ChatGPT. One solution I often see is stop using a deduction-based mindset and switch to an addition-based one, or aim for 80 points instead of 100. But honestly, I found that very difficult to do. Of course, I understand it logically. If I could focus on what I did accomplish rather than what I failed to do, my worries might lessen. But if I could naturally think that way, I wouldn't be struggling with perfectionism in the first place. Also, work and relationships don't come with clear scores. When I make a mistake at work, I can't think, well, I did other things too, so maybe that's 80 points. Instead, I think this is the worst. This is basically a zero. That's exactly why perfectionism is so hard to deal with. So even if I understood it in my head, I couldn't honestly say, I made a mistake, but it's still 80 points, so it's fine. So Why was I able to feel satisfied during this trip, even though it wasn't perfect? The answer is that I had clear, concrete goals rather than vague ideas like 80 points. Specifically, not developing economy class syndrome and not getting arrested. I clearly achieved both of these. Because I'm a perfectionist, I'm very sensitive to whether I've met my goals or not. Instead of vague encouragement like, even if you fail, praise yourself, setting concrete and achievable goals, even if the bar is low, worked much better for me. So I decided to apply this idea to my work as well. One common pattern for me is receiving advice or corrections about my work once a week or once a month, and then dwelling on it for a long time. When my mental state isn't great, I sometimes assume, even when no one is angry, that they must think I'm incompetent and I get really discouraged. So I set a concrete goal. Being corrected up to once per day is okay. The goal isn't particularly logical, and it doesn't mean being corrected once a day is actually fine, but I decided to try it anyway. And on the very first day, I was corrected twice a day by two different people. At that point, I jokingly gave up and changed the route to, okay, up to 3 times per day. It's fine. After that, even when I was corrected, I found myself thinking, oh well, I lost one life today out of three, and moving on much more easily. I was surprised myself. Even though 3 times per day feels awfully generous and completely arbitrary, just having a concrete goal drastically shortened the time I spent dwelling on my mistakes. So today I've been talking about perfectionism. There are times when we think, if I mess up even once, that's unacceptable, and aim for perfection without realizing it. In moments like that, thinking I'll aim for 80 points can feel difficult. But setting specific goals, like being corrected up to 3 times per day is okay, or as long as no one cried at this gathering, it's a success, might make it a little easier to live with perfectionism. If you have any thoughts or experience you'd like to share, I'd love to hear them in the comments. On this channel, I share thoughts like this about mental health, as well as singing cover videos. If you're interested, please subscribe to this channel. See you in the next video. Bye!